have to say anything. We'll just sort of talk through it.
Just randomly choose.
Otherwise, I'm gonna randomly choose. All right. All right. So I'll start with zrobin16. Who is zrobin16? Cool. All right, Zach. Let's see what we got here. All right, we got the New York School of Finance. Cool. So pretty basic site, right? We have a few components outlined here. We have this header. I think that makes sense as a component, definitely. We might swap out the header. We have the title, definitely. We have picture. It looks like this caption goes to the picture. Any thoughts about how maybe we could compose these together? So right now we have like 3 separate components here. So what I'm seeing is that I think these make sense as separate components. However, I think they also make sense together, right? Like even add in if this title goes to the picture, I think what you could probably do is go ahead and wrap this entire section in another component. Because they all sort of go together in the sense that like if this article changes, you would change all of them, not just one of them. And so rather than then having to go in and swap all of them, I could kind of imagine, say, a homepage article component or something, right? Where that all gets swapped out as one. Cool. Yeah, I want to think about like composability. Think about how things sort of go together, get grouped together. The form on the side, definitely. If you wanted to get more granular, you would probably maybe group some of these fields and labels together. So like the email label goes to the email field, or all the checkboxes might go together. Cool, awesome. Let's pull up another one. All right, who's Lon 360? Hey, all right. And what's your name? Sarum, good to meet you. Lum, cool. All right, I probably won't learn names today, but I'll try. I'll give it a shot here. All right, Amazon.com. Yeah, this is a big one. All right, so what do we have? We have the header. Ooh, I like that. The try prime is kind of a subcomponent of the header. Cool. We have our navigation, more navigation over here. Have this big hero image, and that's probably a slider. Yeah, it is right here, right? So that gets swapped out. Slider's a really popular component. Hopefully we'll have a chance to build one this week. So another carousel down here. You can go through multiple images. A little link for see more. You could kind of imagine maybe every item in the carousel or slider maybe being a component. And again, there's no like right or wrong answer here. The granularity is really going to be specific to the needs of your application, and it's going to change. You might build this out as one big component, and then realize down the line, oh, like I had an image here, but sometimes I need there to be like text here, or sometimes I need there to be a link on the actual item, or maybe instead of being a big image up here in the hero, maybe sometimes it's a video, and so you might want to swap that out. Anytime you find one of those like replaceable points, that's when you might want to think like, oh, that's a component. Cool. Amazon. All right. Stephen. Hey. All right. Did you? It's not showing it as a fork. We can figure that out. It might. I don't know why it wouldn't have shown it, because it shouldn't show if you fork at all. All right, so let's show a content site. We have a header. That makes sense. We have a search box. We have the button there. Those sort of go together, right? There are 3 different like images. We have 2 images and like a list here. I think those definitely make sense, because you could definitely see swapping out one of these images for another image. A calendar. Another module here. And then maybe like these individual list items might be modules. There may be not. Or maybe like these articles, I could certainly see those as being pulled together, where you have sort of the teaser and the title, the header, and then footer. Cool. Yeah, I think that looks really good. All right. Who is this? Hey. All right. Let's see what we got. All right. So you get like a blog site here. The ad, that definitely makes sense, right? That's going to be swapped out all the time. And a menu up here, 2 parts of it. So that might be where, like, sometimes being, things might get too granular. Like in this case, well, I don't actually know what the other piece here is. So maybe that would make sense, but maybe it might be too much. The articles, yeah, I think that's huge. Having each article as an individual component. Because you want to start thinking about, if you want to change the design of an article, you want to be able to, you just change that individual one. And you can imagine these are both the same component, right? They're just different instances of the same component. Yeah, we got our little side panels here. Again, like, I don't know, if depending on how complex these might be, you might want to swap these out individually. Nice. All right. All right, I might be going out of order here, but we'll see. All right, so another news site. I think these there are patterns we start to see between different types of sites. You'll notice this, like different patterns of components. You get navigation. You have buttons. Header for this article. Again, this is where maybe like this whole section would be combined as a component. The same thing with these ones on the side, because they sort of all go together. Like if you were to swap out this article, you would swap out all at once. Yeah, weather is completely independent. That makes sense. Cool. I might separate out search, but nice. Whose is this? Hey, cool. David, hey. Yeah, that'd be really helpful. All right, let's see, who haven't I gone to? Is yours showing up yet? Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh, is this you? Oh, okay, yeah, that might be why. Oops. Did you put your image here? Oh, I see. I can just go to your commit, can't I? Cool, okay. All right, so this is like a forum, right? Is this like a forum? No. Or like an image? It's like where people add pages, yeah. Okay, cool. So kind of like a wiki style. Like a wiki style? Yeah. Nice. These sort of sites, particularly sites with content or user-generated content, are really important to think in terms of like modules and components, because users are actually adding their own instances of those. So they might be able to choose different types of components and compose them together. All right, so we got a lot of images. The sidebar blocks, a whole bunch of sidebar blocks. Again, probably the same like general component on a lot of these and just different instances of them. The navigation, add, get a login. These sidebars like a featured page or new additions. Okay. Change automatic, I guess, as people are putting in new stuff. No, it makes sense. Yeah, and it's nice to have those as kind of components when we think about them, because we'll probably be swapping out data sources there and changing. On the back end here, we might say, get the latest image here or something, or get the most popular pages or something like that. Cool. Oops. All right. And yeah, I want you guys to think about, like, if you're working on a web application or a website, or you're involved with one, like, think about that too. I do want to tailor some of this to, what, if you're working on a project, what's relevant to you. All right, let's go to the forks. All right. I'm going to start with the bottom here because I think I haven't gotten these. Okay. All right. Another like blog news site. Whole bunch of blocks. I like the different colors on like composed components. Very nice. Yeah, you definitely have like the header component here and different parts of the header. I think that's important to think about, like what makes up each of these components, namely other components. Cool. One of the things that I find interesting is like design trends especially tend to think in terms of components. Like never forget about code. Design tends to think in terms of separating applications by components, separating them into blocks, separating them into composable pieces. That's actually one of the important parts of software development is working with all these different stakeholders, working with designers, working with people who are doing mock-ups, and kind of getting on the same page in terms of language. If you can talk about your applications with the same terms, with the same terminology, that's huge, because now you have like a shared language. And so when you talk about like a navbar component, if your designer on your team knows about that, and your UX person on the team knows about that, and your business person knows about that, and your developers do as well, and if they correspond to something in each of your day-to-day work, it's really helpful to have that same shared language. Components are a good language for doing that. All right. Ah, look, GitHub. This page looks familiar. Nice, yeah. We'll actually talk about it later, but GitHub's one of the few major websites that actually uses web components in production to some extent. We'll actually go into an example. Yeah, we got the header, we got this little sort of breadcrumb headline here, the sidebar information, this little widget, which is fun. This is actually a really interesting widget. So everyone know what happens when you click this button, the little clipboard button? It copies the URL, which seems like it'd be a really easy thing, but actually it's kind of tricky. You actually have to kind of have some hacky ways to do that. That's one of the nice things about components too, is it can hide those sort of tricky parts of building out an application. Code that might be less than perfect, which always ends up in our code bases or in our applications. That's always going to be there, and yeah, it'd be great if you can make that better. But in the meantime, at least we can like sort of silo it, right? And say, well, maybe if say I wrote this component and it was a little hacky, like I can silo it and work on it later, and refactor it later. That refactoring process is huge. Yeah, the individual buttons. These are actually all, they're not just like buttons that go somewhere. They do something here. So when I click, like it increases the star. And when I click here, it'll bring me to a new URL and fork. And when I click watch, it's not going to leave the page. It's just going to, actually I don't think it leaves. I think it just adds the watch icon. Increments the watch number. So those are like mini applications. And certainly the search, I think some of these search bars have autocomplete too. So as you type in, you're going to see things come down in autocomplete. Again, like a mini application within your application. Cool. And who says this? Hey, Daniel. Cool. Okay. See which other ones I have here.
I'm impressed, by the way, with everybody's outlining technique.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I find this a really good exercise if you're building a site for the first time, or if you're thinking about like restructuring something. Just to pull up either the wireframe or the design. The nice thing is, because we're just taking screenshots here, this is an exercise you can do with PSDs that you get from your designers, like Photoshop documents that you get from designers. You don't actually need a working site to do this exercise. And I think it's good to get everyone on the same page. even in terms of just thinking about how things fit together. All right, who did I miss? Because this, yeah, which one, who are you? Oh, it didn't get on this? Okay. We can work on that later. We'll get the form.
That's Carrie, by the way, everybody, with K.
Hey, Carrie. Oh, C.
Am I saying it right? Yes. Yeah, Carrie. He's from Merced College.
Cool. Welcome.
Glad to have you here, Carrie.
How many of you have done is this your first week at the boot camp? Okay, it's a few of you. Awesome. And then most of you have done some amount of the other boot camps? Nice. All right, anyone else up here that I missed? Yes, nice. So they they do it in a different, in sort of an arbitrary order, so let's see. Oh, nice, Yahoo. You guys worked on this together? Cool. Yahoo's a good one because it's like a very content-driven application. There are a whole bunch of different moving parts. So we have the header. Yep. And yeah, so while search probably makes sense to kind of componentize on its own, it isn't really a moving part. So you can certainly group it together. I get to do both of those together. One thing you think about in componentization is they're all different perspectives at how you look at things. Like you might break things up based on styling, but you might also break things up based on functionality. Or you might also break things up based on kind of the structure of how they fit into your document. So that's a tough, that can be a tough call to make sometimes. If visually they look like they fit together, but functionally they don't. Or vice versa. Functionally they fit together, but visually they don't. Yeah, again, all the articles separate, which I think makes sense. The slider down here, the news articles, the navigation. Cool. Yeah, these are two very different things, right? Like this live concert thing here, which might pull up a video or something, like trending, which is a completely different list. Nice.
I tend to think of components almost more in terms of functionality. Like this is the search area, this is the, this
Yeah.
blog, customer account info. I might want to put customer account info on every page, so I'll have a component that does that.
Yeah, it's I think that's probably one of the more helpful ways to do it. It's certainly, the visual piece is important too, once we start talking about CSS. The interesting thing with components is all these pieces kind of come together. And so because we're doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we have to think what's the most coherent component for all of these pieces? And sometimes it means making compromises if there's functionality that's spread across components. But it's definitely not always easy to figure out what that differentiation is, especially if things are visually distinct or if they're functionally distinct but visually part of the same thing. Yeah. I think it depends on, those sort of rules can be helpful, but it depends on your application, certainly. It's probably a good rule of thumb for the most part. It's one of those things where you don't really know, those sort of maxims, those principles come as a result of the real world experience. And so we look at a lot of UX researchers, for example, will spend time in labs and talking to people and maybe they would take this version of Yahoo and take a different version that was simpler and be like, which one do you prefer? That's one way to get some insight into design. The other way is start doing A/B testing, and that's huge too. So Yahoo, I guarantee, does this, and there are a lot of big companies who have written publicly about how they do their A/B testing. Netflix, Twitter are two big ones, where they might take 3 different designs, serve them to different subsets of customers, and see what the response is on each one of these. Maybe customers with a simpler design end up staying on the site longer. So that's one metric you could look at. If you're an e-commerce site, you might look at conversion. If you're a content site, maybe you look at page views or click-through rate or whatever it is. Whatever that metric is, you can take different designs and definitely A/B test them. And in kind of a component-driven world, you can swap out components and A/B test that. So I could, maybe this slider here is too distracting for people. So like I want to test what it would be like without that. So I can just take it out. And I can take it out without breaking anything else on the page. That's the important piece. Because otherwise you can't iterate quickly and figure out what you want if taking out the slider would break a whole bunch of other things.
Simply the way that this page is arranged, you can ask, okay, we have all these boxes, and from the programming perspective, these are all different elements.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just simply looking at it, you get the bar at the top, you get the box at the upper right where you have your choices, a sidebar on the left, a sidebar on the right, stuff in the middle. If you say stuff in the middle is like one thing, and then, okay, I'll look at stuff in the middle, now I see all these things, but I'm not looking at the rest of it. So it might kind of take care of itself that way too.
Yeah, sometimes the boxes can distract. Like we might think of these, from a technical perspective, but the user's just going to kind of hone in on this one column. Columns is a very common pattern, and we'll talk about grids. I think you guys did some grids in the CSS section for the boot camp.
We didn't really do grids.
Okay.
We did floats, clearing floats, and flex box.
Okay.
We did inline walk.
Okay, we'll talk a bit about grids once we get to the CSS section, because for components they're really helpful. Because I think visually you can see that this sort of fits into a grid. We have different columns, we have different rows.
We talked a little about grids when we were with Ray. We looked at something I can't remember, but briefly we touched on grids.
Cool.
When we were doing SAS stuff.
Yeah, once we get to like composing applications, we'll go into some more detail. All right, great. How many enjoyed that exercise? All right, cool. It's definitely something that I think is a little different. You might not expect at a programming boot camp, but I think it's always good to step back from the code, especially when we start thinking about like components and patterns and thinking how things fit together, thinking about architecture. As you like build more and more applications, you start to realize like the code is actually the easier part. Like once you master the code, then it's problem solving, and it's solving bigger problems in terms of architecture, in terms of patterns, in terms of making things fit together.